I'm trying to get a sponsorship.
Hey, now, everybody. Good morning. This is a beautiful football Saturday. What's going on? I'm saying hello to my boys on the panel. What's up, guys?
Morning, Big Law.
Morning.
Hey. So I'm filling in, everybody. Usually you would see Rick's beautiful face, but hey, you got the big man with the beard running the panel today. I am Big Law from 7 City Shop Talk, also from Woo Sports Radio as well. But I do have an esteemed and established panel with me today. Got my man Ryan Roberts, consulting for head of drafts consulting for NFL Draft Bible. Got my man David Turner, the CEO for Maverick Sports Consulting, and my man John Murphy from the Toronto Argonauts, Vice President of Player Personnel. Good morning, gentlemen. What do you guys have to say today? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Nothing, man. We got another nice slate. It's David's excited that there's not going to be as many upset alerts today with Rick off, but I'm happy to have Big Law on here because he's still got the siren ready to sound. And man, it's going to be a fun slate today.
I think so. What about you, David?
I am excited to keep Rick's upset alert crap out of the mix for this morning, and let's get it on. Just like, hey, now we can finally have an intelligent football conversation.
Sharpen the swords.
And Big Law and me, we're gonna see some depth today. Big RIC, we were gonna miss your kid, but we're not gonna miss that alert at all.
Absolutely. And what about you, my man, Big John? What's going on, my man in the South? What's up?
Well, I figured he'd wait for a Monday to take those days off so he can lick his wounds after he has to be down by almost double digits. If you're out there, you're spending your extra Saturday time, it better be warming up those NFL picks. But we'll take care of business for him for 1 week, and we'll look forward to a good slate of games here, unless you're LSU, in which case you better just move on to next week. Well, maybe not move on to next week either because I think that's Florida, so it's going to be a couple rough weeks there for the Tigers.
Absolutely. And, of course, this Saturday is a glorious Saturday because we got some pretty good games, but we got some dog games as well. But if you guys are ready, let's just jump into it. I mean, right now, ESPN Game Day is where they are at the Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina, okay? You know, we had a great conversation about this yesterday on the show. And, of course, I took a whooping from John telling me how BYU is going to hand it to him, going to fry him, put a little Nashville hot sauce on them, going to cook these Chanticleers up. But I don't believe it, all right? I think there's going to be an upset alert, and I'm not going to sound the siren yet until we get to David. But,
under special instruction, save that for David.
Okay, exactly. But I want to get to my man Ryan. So, Ryan, right now, BYU 9-0, and the Chanticleers are 9-0 as well. Believe it or not, this is the biggest game of the day. And like I said, ESPN Game Day is there. What can you tell me about this game today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun matchup, if nothing else, right? We have the Mormons versus the Mullets, which the shirts are coming out of nowhere, which is a lot of fun. Zach Wilson has been phenomenal this year. I wanted a little more of a resume game than headed to Coastal Carolina for Game Day, but I'll take what I can get, especially against that defensive line over there in Coastal Carolina. Teron Jackson going up to down to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. C.J. Brewer on the inside, another guy, sack guy. You got Jeffrey Gunter at defensive end, opposite Teron Jackson. So they're going to be able to bring some pressure. The question is how much against a very experienced and talented BYU offensive line. On the other side of the ball, Grayson McCall, redshirt freshman quarterback from Coastal Carolina, is a very talented signal caller in his own right. C.J. Marable, who was at Presbyterian around the same time as Rocky Sin, and when they went to a non-scholarship program, he ended up transferring to Coastal Carolina. Isaiah Likely, a very talented tight end that you're going to hear over the next couple years as well. So it's going to be a really fun matchup. I'm not quite with John to the extent that it's going to be a thorough butt whooping. I almost cursed, and I almost went there. I almost went to the swear jar, but I did not. But I will say, I think that BYU does win this football game, probably to the tune of 35-21, but I think that it's going to be a pretty highly contested affair for most of the day. But at the end of the game, it's just going to be a little too much BYU, a little too much Zach Wilson for the Chanticleers to keep pace.
Well, I'm still going to push for those Chanticleers, and I want to see what's going to happen with that game. So moving on to the SEC, of course, usually in any other year but this COVID year, this game would be the biggest game of the year. But the Alabama Crimson Tide, the consensus #1 team in America, is going to face LSU and Ed Orgeron. What can you tell me about this game on CBS primetime game tonight? My man John Murphy, what you got for me on this game?
Well, I think here's another opportunity for Mac Jones to put himself on a big stage again, even though the matchup is not what we would have expected. I think he keeps having an opportunity to keep the momentum flowing. Even if he doesn't get to a Heisman opportunity this year, he certainly has established himself, as their quarterback. Terrace Marshall opting out last week, that kind of gives LSU even less of an opportunity to challenge, in this game. And we mentioned it. This has to start being, you're playing for next year. You're playing for your guys that you're trying to get a look at, to see there. We might get a good look at a future NFL matchup anytime that Stingley's covering either one of Mechie or, Devonta Smith. But I mean, in all reality here, you're talking about having to have a monumental effort on the defensive side that we have not seen yet at all out of LSU. In all reality, their best defensive effort came against Arkansas, and I'm sorry, that's Arkansas, right? So that doesn't really count, in the big dogs of the SEC, saying that you held Arkansas to 24 doesn't really ring the bell, for you. So unless we're seeing something catastrophic, which would be multiple turnovers and something to where they're having to play, even a backup quarterback at Alabama today. I got a feeling a backup quarterback will be in there for Alabama, but it'll probably be because of the score of the game. And I think really that's kind of where we're at, in 2020 with things. And like I said, it's December 5th. That's not going to be a good date for LSU. I will give you a good date for LSU. January 2nd, when all the 5 stars, can say where they're going, and if they're able to close, a couple of those guys this weekend who are, there's possibly 3 5-star players for next year's class that'll be in attendance, at today's game. So hopefully, what they're looking at is coming in as reinforcements and going over there and helping them next year when they're facing Saban, because this game is not, going to be one on the field. Is not going to be one that's heavily contested, and it's not going to be one heavily contested if you start comparing. Leatherwood's clearly the best O-lineman in the game, right? So pretty much in every area not named Stingley, the best player in terms of draftable grades is on Alabama. And that's where you see right now there's a very big, difference in terms of how Alabama's playing, the level that they're playing at consistently. And just that some of those guys that played really well last year have not stepped up their game in order to give LSU any real fight in some of these games. Now, you want to watch 2 guys for the draft from LSU who could have better games today and then really help themselves. Jabril Cox has played as well as expected, transferring to LSU. He has shown some versatility, some things you didn't expect to see him last week in coverage against the Texas A&M tight end. I thought that was impressive. And helps his game out. Ja'Cory Stevens has kind of been up and down. It's not really been the type of season that you expected after what you saw last year. Some of the younger DBs, even though they've had some issues in terms of coverage, have shown you that they're taking steps. Eli Ricks will be a guy down the road that's a real player, for them. And then the combination of Andre Anthony and Ali Gale, they're starting to get some pass rush, but it's just not consistent enough for me to think that they're going to pose any kind of problem here. Unfortunately, I see high 40s, low 50s, and I'm not talking about the temperature at kickoff. I'm talking about points on the board for Alabama. And the only way, that anything happens here is if Saban and the first teamers stay at home.
Well, I can tell you this. Usually we refer to the SEC as NFL light. And I can tell you, LSU is being NFL light, where you win the championship one year and then you don't even make the damn playoffs the next. I mean, who would have knew that the best football isn't, in the Panhandle in Louisiana isn't played by LSU, But getting into the ACC, which is a little bit more my territory, all right. And we got Clemson, all right, playing Virginia Tech. My man David Turner, all right, my man laid up, but he's feeling good, feeling better. What you got for me on this game? Big game, believe it or not, in the ACC. Even though Tech does have a losing record, it's still a big game.
Well, listen, you better keep that alarm in your pocket. That's all I'm saying on this right now.
Whoa.
You better just keep that alarm in that pocket.
He's just happy to see you.
I'm just happy to see anybody besides the four walls in my house and my doctors who keep telling me worse and worse news. No, but I mean, this is exciting. Trevor Lawrence came back last week, off his injury and a 2-week vacation. And he threw 403 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Pitt Panthers. So we're excited to see if he can continue that this week against Virginia Tech. I really want to see ATM have a monster game eventually coming one way or another. I mean, this is probably the best running back in the ACC, but they're not doing it up front, in my opinion. The offensive line is just not opening up holes. They're 11th in the ACC in rushing, and they got this incredible back. So I want to see that offensive line for Clemson really show up today and do something, open some holes, so we can get ATN chewing through this defense a little bit. Now, I think that Virginia Tech leads the ACC in rushing. So if they're going to be in the game at all, it's because they're going to have the ability to run the ball. They're at 251 yards per game. So this is going to be a good matchup on that side of the ball because you got Clemson, whose rush defense is third, I think, only allowing 103 yards a game. So VTech wants to run the ball. Clemson's coming in to stop the run and give the offense as many touches as it can so ATN and Lawrence can eat. Other players to look for on offense is Cornell Powell, nice wide receiver. He's making a really good statement for himself this year. I think he's going to be a guy to be looking for when it comes draft time. And, on the defensive side, if Ryan, what's this kid's name? James Skalski. And Davis are playing.
That's an easy one. That was a layup.
That is not a layup. I mean, even later, I got some Polynesian names you're going to have to help me with. I mean, the butcher is in effect. I need an apron and a knife when I come to this school to talk about these classes. But if Skalski and Davis are playing, that's going to help the Clemson defense out. If not, it's going to be a rough day, and Virginia Tech could wind up running all over them, keeping this high-power offense on the bench.
Wow. Okay. I like to hear that. And of course, you guys see where I am. I'm on location here in Charlottesville. I got the game today. I got Boston College against the Wahoos. And of course, they're finally letting us back in the press box. So I'll be there and I'll do a pregame and a halftime review as well. So let me give you a quick review of the game. Of course, Boston College coming into town with a 6-4 record. And Phil Jurkovich is still hot. He's still has kind of changed the identity of what you would think a Boston College team would be. Typically, they would grind you out, run the ball, play great defense, and wind up winning the game. But no, they're kind of an open air passing team now, and Bronco Mendenhall has the upfront weapons. The difference is will the guys in the back end be able to deal with that pass and attack? I mean, they did lose Charles Snowden for the year, but they still have Matt Gam and Noah Taylor up front, along with my man in the middle, Zane Zandier, and Nick Jackson. So these linebackers are some of the best ones in the ACC as far as the group goes, collaborative. And I think they can get to Jurkovich and make him make some mistakes and get some pressure on him. But the real bigger issue is not necessarily an issue, but more so the question is, can the quarterback not turn the ball over? Brennan Armstrong is a good quarterback when he doesn't turn the ball over. He's steady. He's a true dual threat. He can run, he can pass, but can he not make the critical turnover in a game like this? You can't make any turnovers. You can't have any turnovers in a game like this because this is the kind of team that will bury you if you do make some mistakes. But they are in Charlottesville. They did have to travel down. The Wahoos are upset because Florida State was ducking them last week. And I think they're ready, with that bye week they didn't want. And I think the Wahoos are going to pull it out. I'm not going to sound any alarms, but I think the Wahoos are going to pull this out. And I think it could be a 7-point victory. And that's what I think is going to be. But I will be in the stadium, so everybody follow me, follow us, and we'll keep you up to date on what happens in that game. Kickoff is at 3:30 today. So let's get to the next game. We got a game in the MAC between Buffalo and the Ohio Bobcats. It'll be on CBS-SN. My man Ryan Roberts is on this game. What do we got going on for this game, Ryan?
I mean, another fun one, at least for the Buffalo Bulls. We're talking about Jared Patterson, who over the last 2 weeks has run for over 700 yards and 12 touchdowns. A week after running for 301, he puts up 409. Coach took him out. He could have broken the all-time rushing record in the game and the rushing touchdown record, which has stood since 1990, Howard Griffith out of Illinois. So what would have been a monumental day. Is he going to break it this week? Probably not, because who's going to put back-to-back 400-yard games on the docket? But over 900 yards in 4 games. Ohio, another Rourke at quarterback. Nathan Rourke over the last few years. Now they have his younger brother Curtis playing quarterback. Done a pretty solid job so far managing the game. He's got a little bit of he's got a really nice arm. A redshirt freshman over there to keep an eye on. But at the end of the day, Buffalo Bulls led by Jared Patterson, Kevin Marks at another running back, Malcolm Kuntz on defense, Taylor Riggins at the other defensive end. It's just going to be a little too much. I think Buffalo ends up rolling this one. Not another 400-yard game for Jared Patterson, but probably a nice 3-touchdown victory for the Buffalo Bulls today.
All right. Thank you for that. Now let's get to the next game. Ryan, I'm going to give you the next one as well. In the Mountain West, we got the San Jose State University going up against the Hawaii team. Now, University of Hawaii has always been one of my favorite teams. It's always a game that, I'm kind of a night owl where I'll be up late and watching these games. Of course, San Jose is 4-0, Hawaii 3-3. What can you tell me about this game coming up tonight?
Well, San Jose State's got Nick Starkel, who went from Texas A&M to Arkansas, now over at San Jose State, playing some really good football quietly for 4-0 San Jose State this year. And we're looking at this game and taking on Hawaii, who is coming off of an upset victory over Nevada last week, taking down Carson Strong 24-21. Could be another high-scoring affair. San Jose State, Nick Starkel passing to guys like Trey Walker, Billy Gaither, some talented weapons over there. Hawaii, I feel like I keep calling about Rico Bussey Jr., the transfer from North Texas, to finally take that next step because he had a couple solid games to start the year and it's been pretty quiet since then. I think it's a high-scoring affair. I think San Jose State probably takes this one, but it's going to be a really close football game. But Rico Bussey Jr., the wide receiver for Hawaii, and the 2 wide receivers for San Jose State, along with Nick Starkel, are definitely the headliners for NFL draft-wise to keep an eye on in this game.
All right, appreciate that. Now getting into the Pac-12, my man David Turner, what you got, man? We got Stanford and Washington. You know what? Whenever I see those little numbers, I see 1-12, 3-0. It's like they played half of a season, or not even half of a season. It's like, are they going to get, they're just due because they played half of a season and other teams are on 8 and 9 wins or 8 and 9 games? What can you give me as far as, as far as an update of the games that are going to be played? Are they going to be allowed to play in the championship? Are they going to be considered for any other bowl games or anything else besides, their conference championship? But we got the game today between Stanford and Washington. What can you tell me about that?
Bowl games? Are we talking bowl games here? Like bowl games?
Yeah, bowl
games?
Well,
like really, we're talking bowl game. We're not talking about like championship games. We're talking bowl games.
Well, they don't have enough games to qualify. So
well, how can we talk bowl games? I mean, Stanford can't even play at home. They're in Las Vegas because. So how are we talking bowl games?
Las Vegas Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, was it the Rose Bowl already talked about? No fans at all. Fiesta Bowl down here in Arizona is talking about just allowing the close family to players in for the bowl. So I think bowl games is such a far-fetched concept right now in our day and age. Who's going to be eligible? Who's not going to be eligible? What can a bowl game do to attract a team to even play in it? And then how many players of any kind of draft quality will play this year? I would say it's 0. There's no chance that anybody who has a opportunity this year to get drafted will play in a bowl game. They'll all opt out. We saw a handful of opt-outs already this week. And we're going to see, I think, some more coming in the following weeks. So
David hates opt-outs. He hates opt-outs. They're quitters, right, David?
Well, hey, here's the thing. You want to talk? You want to go down this rabbit hole? Let's go down this rabbit hole. We will go down this rabbit hole. Listen here, Cinderella. So we if you start the season under adversity and it's going to be adversity and it's not going to be your ideal season, and then you go and opt out now, you're quitting on your team. If you had opted out in the beginning of the season, I get it. You didn't want to go through the season. Your coaches, your team weren't counting on you. Right now, as it's not going your way, oh, boo-boo, baby. Now you want to opt out. Now you want to put the boo-boo lip on and say, well, I'm just going to go for I got enough tape for me, so I'm going to go do my career. So, I don't like it. It's not my mentality that I would, if again, like I told Ryan on Mav Sports Take this week, if there is a player that played the whole season and a player that opted out and they're neck and neck on my board, I'm going to take the player that saw the whole season through and stayed and developed their game and did what they did, which was handle the adversity and honor their word and be there for their team. But let's get back to Stanford and Washington, Mr. Chimer. Stanford is 1-2, and Washington is rolling in at 3-0. The one interesting thing I found about Stanford is they've only had one turnover on the year. Davis Miles, the quarterback's not thrown an interception yet in the 3 games. So this is something you expect from David Shaw, a very disciplined team, a very sound team. The wins aren't coming, but the one dynamic player they have right now, in my opinion, is this running back, sophomore Austin Jones. He's got 270 yards in the first 3 games, and he's got 5 touchdowns rushing for him already. He's a player that, again, Stanford's going to want to work the offense through. And they have a few receivers. They're all underclassmen. Michael Wilson's a junior. Connor Weddington is a redshirt junior. And then Simi Fihoko. Thank you, Fiocco, is a deep threat sophomore. So, Miles has got some people to throw to. But I think that Stanford ultimately wants to use the running game to dictate this matchup. On the other side of the ball, Cade Otton, to me, from Washington, is one of the premier tight ends in the country this year. He's got 8 catches for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns this last week. On the year, he's 16 touchdowns for 212 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Dylan Morris over there, a redshirt freshman who's showing a little bit of moxie, a little bit of arm talent so far. He's got a reliable tight end, like we talked about last night in our salary cap. When a quarterback has a reliable tight end, they're usually better off. So they got a reliable outlet there for him. And one of the freakiest players you're going to watch is redshirt sophomore Zion. Go ahead, Ryan.
Tapula Fetu.
This kid is like 6'3", 280, and he has 7 sacks on the year and 3 forced fumbles. I mean, wow. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he could declare for the draft. He technically could declare for the draft, and at 6'3" and 280, if those are his genuine numbers, and he's racking up these kind of numbers, I usually never say for a young man to come out, but this is a guy who's playing defensive end, who would be very versatile, who might want to think about coming out if he keeps racking up these numbers.
What are you looking at, like a 3-4 defensive end, with those kind of measurables and that kind of a talent? Or can he stand up, you think? I mean, does he have the wheels to stand up and play, the outside backer in a 3-4? Or is he just a straight 4-3 defensive end?
I think, and I'm not doing the comparison, but initial reaction, he kind of reminds me of like old school Reggie White, a big dude who can bend.
Whoa.
I know. But you gotta understand, like old school Reggie White was like a 280 type player that can bend like this. And this is a guy who's 280 and can bend. It's not like you get this every day. You don't get a guy who's like 280 that can bend like this.
Sirens?
So, I'm just saying, like,
comparison alert.
I'm just saying, when you watch the kid's game, I'm not saying you see the hump move that Reggie brought, but you see the bend for a big guy. So you might have a legitimate left side defensive end. I don't know if he's going to be a right side where you would see the premier pass rushers, but you see a left side defensive end. And you got to understand, like, the left side is where you saw Reggie White, Bruce Smith, and Michael Strahan all play. And at their best, they all were around 270, 280, playing that left side defensive end and could pass rush. So if you can develop this kid at that size, and on that side of the defensive line, you could really see a special talent here.
Wow, it's like just by you speaking about him, sounds like a player. He was an offensive player, but remember Mike Sellers, from Walla Walla. similar in that body type of structure, the way you described him, but he was an offensive player and he could play tight end, fullback, running back, whatever you needed him to play. But that's some really good information. We'll keep some notes on that. But let's keep moving. We're going to jump into the next game. We got my man John Murphy. We're going to talk about Fresno State and Nevada today. What you got going on for that game, John?
Yeah, originally it was going to be Houston SMU. They decided to cancel. So we get some Fresno State against Nevada action. Interesting game. They both have one loss. Hawaii came in there and kind of snuck in and got a victory over Nevada last week. But when you look, Carson Strong is that other quarterback out west, that people are now having to evaluate. Does he?
Ryan loves this kid.
Jump?
Ryan loves him.
Does he make the jump, or is he the guy next year that might be able to be a much higher pick if he decides to stay? What hasn't happened is no one in that conference has covered his number one receiver. So Romeo has scored on Juliet, and then Romeo has scored on everybody else that he's gone against, because Romeo Dubes is averaging, well over 100 yards per game and pretty much has a highlight reel catch every week. Now, if you're looking for why this could become a game, on the flip side, Fresno State has Ronnie Rivers Jr., who's doing his thing both as a receiver, out of the backfield, and also as a runner. The other thing Fresno State does is they create a lot of pressure. They already have 20 sacks in 4 games played. So now Strong has got sacked 13 times in their 6 games. So there's a little bit of something there where Fresno State might be able to create a little more pressure than Nevada's offense has been used to seeing, in the games they played so far. Still think at home, Nevada has a good chance of improving their record and keeping it just to a one-loss, affair for them. But Fresno State bringing that pass rush and being able to run the ball gives themselves a good opportunity to make this a more interesting game than what you would initially see on paper. Their whole thing is offensively for Fresno State, it's kind of hit or miss, with Jake Haener. It's some games, you watch them and they, and they have some good ebb and flow there. Other games, there's a lot of turnovers, out of them. So if you keep the game clean, this should be a nice, kind of old school, whack Mountain West type affair where you're getting into the high 30s, on both sides. And where the difference maker seems to be is no one so far has been able to figure out how to slow down Carson Strong to Romeo Dubes. Not sure Fresno State has the answer for that, but we'll see if Nevada can roll the dice and stop that pass rush of Fresno State.
I like the mention of Ronnie Rivers there, John, because he's actually, if you're a PFF guy, he's the only running back in college football right now that has over an 80 grade as a runner, receiver, and pass blocker. So having a really outstanding year that not a lot of people have paid attention to. And as David said, I am a Carson Strong believer already in this young season. And through 6 games, I think they are 5-1. And a little side note here, next week on Believe in NFL Draft Prospect, I actually have the interview with Carson Strong. He's coming on the podcast to discuss the season so far. So make sure to tune into that. But it should be a fun one out in the Mountain West today.
Also, guys, remember to sign up for these Friday Night Scout schools that they have here with the NFL Draft Bible. It's worth every dime. Hey, you want to learn some things. You're trying to get into this world of NFL scouting, NFL on the professional side. Sign up for the scout schools. You'll learn a lot, and these guys are the best. So let's keep this thing moving. We got a big game in the Big Ten, my man, David. We got Indiana at 12. We got Wisconsin at 16. All right, at 3:30 today, ABC. It's going to come at you pretty quick today. So what can you tell me about this big game today in the Big Ten?
Well, Indiana's limping in with a sore paw because they're starting quarterbacks out. So that took a little luster out of this game here. To be honest with you, Wisco is now favored by 2 touchdowns. You got number 16 Wisco versus number 12 Indiana. With the quarterback in, I think this game would have got more hype than more publicity than what we're seeing right now because – again, you just don't have the quarterback to distribute the ball to Indiana's great senior receiver to some here in Freigogel and Philon, right? Philior, whatever. Butcher's in the house. Butcher's in the house. So, those 2 receivers, we'll see how they'll respond. I'm anticipating a lot more bubble screens and get the ball into their hands and see what they can do after they catch it, because they're just not going to have the quarterback power that they were supposed to have. On the defense, though, for Indiana, I want to see how Tywone Mullen matches up here on some of these Wisco receivers, and Micah McFadden, the linebacker. Can he stop and step it up against this Wisconsin offensive line and do some things? Obviously, on Wisconsin, you have two great redshirt senior offensive linemen in John Deitzen and Cole Von Laden. Cole's the left tackle and John's the right guard. So I want to see how these two great senior offensive linemen step up and play. Jake Ferguson, again, another great tight end, redshirt junior, probably coming out, going to test his NFL waters after this. And one of our favorites here on Draft Bible and at Scout School, Mason Stokey, baby. Mason Stoke is clearing the way for running backs left and right. We love this fullback. We think this fullback needs all the press we can give him because fullback's a dying breed. But this is one of my favorite college players this year. I love watching him open up the line and just be a great he's a great out of the backfield catching the ball. I compared him to Rathman. Now, and then Rick peed all over that one. He didn't like that. and then said, "What about All Scott?" He goes, "I don't know if he's All Scott either." But I'm telling you, this is a guy who's got a great genetical makeup that can be a great fullback at the next level.
Maybe a little bit of a Juszczyk. Is that kind of a better comparison, you think? Or is he? Or you think he's going to come?
David likes to compare players to all-time greats. That's his kind of his style. So.
Well, you know what? When you got historical references, that makes sense. I can't help the young people in the room don't know their history. I mean, John and I can remember going back in the day and watching a great Tom Rathman actually play football. So we can make that comparison. These young bucks in the room, they just, they're all about the new generation. You should learn your history books a little bit.
Oh, I know my history book. Thank you, though.
Yeah, Wisconsin always known for bringing in a tough style of play, bringing in players that are used to, similar to Iowa, in my opinion, like Kirk Ferentz, where they bring in the linemen. You want to go get a lineman to help rebuild your program, go to Iowa or go to Wisconsin. You're going to find some studs out there to help rebuild it. But let's keep moving here. We got a Big 12 game, and this is Oklahoma. This is 6 straight for them, correct? If I'm not wrong. Coming in against Baylor, where this would typically be a really big game between these two teams. But Baylor at 2-5 has an opportunity to ruin Oklahoma's chances for the Big 12 championship game. So, John, what can you tell me about Oklahoma? Are they going to continue to be on this roll, or is Baylor going to surprise them and spoil their run?
Yeah, we talked a little about it yesterday. I think the biggest problem here is that once Oklahoma figured out some of their offensive issues in terms of turnovers, the defense always hasn't been there throughout the course of the year, but the offense has kind of figured it out. Now they've gotten on a roll, handing the ball off to 2 younger guys, and Ramonde Stevenson, who has really picked up his game, in the past month and given him a north-south ground game to go along with Spencer Rattler. Defensively, surprisingly and not surprisingly, that Dave Aranda has turned Baylor into a better defensive team than they've been, holding clubs to 27 points. That may not sound like a big deal, but go look at the defenses in the Big 12 and you realize how much better defense Baylor is playing than most of them. I think the struggle here is Charlie Brewer, good college quarterback, doesn't have all the weapons around them that they've had in the past. I think Oklahoma has more than enough on both sides of the ball to not make this game interesting, as we get into it. But Dave Aranda has a good idea of how to take away what you want to do or take away what you think you do best and make you do something different. Could you see a possibility of a few turnovers or, at least a couple of, instances in the game, where Oklahoma may have to settle for 3 instead of 7 or get a couple extra punts there? I think if they can keep showing defensively the improvements that they have, it's a good foreshadowing of what Baylor will look like in the future. But it may not be the team, it may not be your daddy's Baylor team moving forward. We may be talking in the next 2 to 3 years about Baylor and their defense, not Baylor and a high-powered offense. So a little something, new to get used to, that we're talking about Baylor and playing, better than average defense. But what we're not going to get is probably a shootout here like we're used to. So I think Oklahoma makes up for a couple of these games the last few years that, Baylor has given them a run for their money. And it kind of ends up looking a lot like that Oklahoma State game, 41-13, 41-20, type range. And this is a team that's going to look back at that early part of the season and say what could have been, because there's now every opportunity that if you don't get in the top four, your reward for not getting in the top four is you're going to get a game against Oklahoma, and potentially that's not going to be fun, because I'll give you one. Oklahoma and Texas A&M right now would be really interesting after how I saw Texas A&M perform offensively last week. So that would be a closer matchup, and it would also be a really interesting matchup if you gave BYU or Cincinnati a crack at a top 10 or a little outside top 10 Oklahoma, because that would be some comeuppance possibly, for an undefeated team to give them a chance to play against, one of the big boys. And then maybe we can separate it, right? We mentioned it. I jokingly said, whoever doesn't get in the top four, if you're a non-power five and we give you a power five team in the bowl game, good news is if you win, you don't have to be considered that for 1 year. You can stop being compared and just be compared, on a flat playing field with all these teams. But I think Oklahoma has really set themselves up well, even with a 2-loss season. But it's a 2-loss season with a freshman quarterback, really a freshman running back, and an unknown senior, and a lot of guys there to make you believe that next year, no doubt in my mind, Oklahoma is starting as a top 5 ranked team for 2021.
Okay, very cool. I like to hear that, man. I know we got a little time here, so I want to do a little bit of a round robin since I have the best scouts in America on the line here with me. So I'm gonna start with you, Murph. I just had a thought in mind. The public always loves a surprise, a good surprise, and especially when we're talking about sports. I want your under the radar special talent that's draftable. Just a couple guys that you think under the radar, draftable, nobody talks about coming up for next year's draft.
That's a really excellent question.
And I'm coming to you with it too, David and Ryan.
Yeah, that's a real that's a really good hit there.
Well, how high are we talking, Big Law? Are we talking guys that might not be in the conversation, that might be top 100 kids that maybe nobody knows much about?
Yes. Kids that somebody doesn't know much about, but a player like, who could probably get to, maybe, top, well, I'm not going to say first day pick. Those are obvious. But I'm thinking, maybe somewhere between 3 and 6, 3 and 5. Somebody nobody knows about, but could be an impact player that gets on a roster, that makes an NFL roster.
Gotcha.
I come back to you, Murph. You got somebody, Ryan?
I'm still thinking, to be honest.
Well, I just wanted to mention the chat room. It looks like Big Law's got a fan up in this chat room here. Jesse is just all over Big Law. He's loving it, and he's just ripping on me. So this is great. Just want to say thanks for all you that are up watching and putting chat in the comments here. Samantha's already calling John out for the curse jar. So this is great. I'm just like this.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in and being here, because this is awesome. Jesse, Big Law is sending you some Big Law fan gear. You're going to be the president of his fan club here really quick. So who you got, Big Ryan? I'm sure it's a Notre Dame player, and John's going to pull an LSU player out because that's what they do. That's all they talk about is Notre Dame and LSU.
Well, I think that's maybe we should start Notre Dame, right? Like let's throw some guys out.
Shocker!
All right, so I'll give you a guy that I know Jim Nagy talked about a couple weeks ago on Twitter. He hasn't been invited to the Senior Bowl yet, but I'm talking about Ben Scaronick, wide receiver from Northwestern. Do I think that he's necessarily going to be a top 3 to 5 round pick? I think that he could be draftable to a degree, though. He's a wide receiver, former transfer from Northwestern that came in his lone season at Notre Dame, has turned himself into a very viable option. Has had 2 games with 2+ touchdowns this year. Big 6'2+, 220+ pounds. He's one of those wide receivers that is never going to be the sexy player. He's never going to be your leading target getter. But what he is, he's going to be a guy that's going to be just on the roster because he's such a damn good blocker. He does some great things in the red zone. He's that kind of a glue guy for a roster there for Ben Scaronick. And I think that he's one of the unsung heroes on number 2 Notre Dame's team this year. The guys that maybe, you're not talking about him as much as Ian Book, obviously, Kyron Williams, some of the defensive players on Notre Dame. But him at wide receiver has been such a consistent player for Notre Dame throughout the year. Took a jet sweep for a touchdown last week. He's that glue guy that I think is going to make a stay in the NFL for a long time, but might never get big publicity. But he's not the top 100 guy that everybody wants to talk about because he's not going to be a guy that's going to catch 70-plus balls. But I think he's a guy that's going to take out a niche in the NFL for a long time and just be that glue guy that every team needs.
Absolutely. You always need those guys on your roster. They keep your team together, like you said, with the glue. And also, they may not be the starter, but they may be the 3rd or 4th player off the bench. So when one of your high-dollar guys get hurt, you can pull this guy in, and he can fill in and get you to the next level and get you some wins before your regular starter high-dollar player comes back. You got anybody for me, David?
Oh, yeah. If you're going to talk glue guys, let's just talk about, what really matters, Ryan, the offensive line. Okay. Let's talk about the big hog maulers up front. Florida center, Bret Hedgie. And
you
Brian's,
love this guy.
I love Hedgie. I think this guy's an NFL center all day long. He's like 6'3.5", almost 6'4", and he's 320 pounds. When you watch Florida, watch this center. Nobody pushes him. Nobody gets on his edges. He moves his feet extremely well in those tight spaces. He's got good pad level leverage. He sits in a chair. He's able to anchor against these big guys that he's going up against each and every week. Pressure is often not coming from his gaps, his responsibilities. The guards and the tackles at Florida sometimes lapse. This kid is consistent. He's a cornerstone in the middle of this offensive line. As much as I watch Trask and Pitts and all those Tony, who I love Tony, I'm watching the Hedgie. And Ryan can tell you, we talk Florida football, I bring Hedgie up because this is a kid who absolutely has made a huge impression on me. I think he goes in the first 3 rounds. Nobody's talking about him right now, and he winds up becoming a really staple for somebody's offensive line in the NFL.
Oh, hot take, David Turner. It's got to be a Florida Gator, though. Who else would it be, David, right?
Oh, listen, you Irish. All you do is, why would I say? We're going to talk about the Irish, and you didn't disappoint. You brought up the Irish, baby.
Well, it's good that we didn't talk about the game today because you would have picked Syracuse to upset Notre Dame somehow, some way. That's always going to happen.
Screw it up. Kelly's going to screw it up some way.
Big Law, I want to mention one other guy, though, if I can.
What you got?
I just saw
you got it. Go ahead.
He actually declared earlier today, which is really weird timing. NC State is scheduled to play today at 4 o'clock Eastern time. Right. Their defensive tackle, Aleem McNeil, actually had just announced maybe like a half an hour ago that he is entering the NFL draft. So I assume that he's not playing today, which is kind of very odd timing for that declaration. But he's a guy, 6'2", 320 pounds. I think he's a guy that could potentially sneak in there, especially if he tests well, because he has had a really nice season. He's one of the highest graded defensive tackles in the country by most people that keep grades, right? Like the PFFs of the world. I've dug into a little bit of his film for this year. I liked his film a lot in 2019, but apparently he has taken it complete up a notch. So he might be an interior defensive lineman that might be in that top 100 conversation. Just a little bit of weird timing right now. I feel like he probably should have made this declaration maybe a couple days ago, but he chose the day of the game to take away from the NC State fanfare of the day. All they're going to be talking about now is Aleem McNeil declaring instead of him playing for the Wolfpack today.
And you got a great pick on that. I seen Aleem McNeil firsthand do a trifecta against Brandon Armstrong. Tips the ball, catches the ball, runs it in for a touchdown. The guy looked like a running back going in.
He was a running back in high school. He was a running back in high school. I like 280 pounds. It was gross.
Well, you can see it with his hands, his hand-eye coordination, and then his feet, the way he ran it in. He looked great. And I was like, wow, I said, this guy. And then he controlled the middle, and UVA couldn't run the game, which is why they lost that game at home. But Aleem McNeil is a great pick. I've seen him firsthand, and that's a good one. I'm coming to you now, Big John. What you got for me as far as your under-the-radar talent that can make an NFL roster somewhere between rounds 3 and 6?
Well, the good news is my guy hadn't even played this year.
Okay.
He hadn't even played yet.
That's a real gem.
He hadn't even played yet.
Real diamond.
And we're going in right in your backyard.
Okay. In the backyard.
Behind your yard where you were fielding for yard birds yesterday.
Okay.
And I'm going with Brian Mills, North Carolina Central DB.
Whoa.
I think, we're not going to possibly see the Senior Bowl the way that we have seen it in the past. But here's a kid to me, when the NFL sees him at the weigh-in and you are all arms and legs as a DB and you're 6'1" and change, small school kid, to me that gets you on the radar for guys to then want to watch the practices, see you in the individual drills, and then, watch you play in the game. And I think coming off of last year, had he gotten a chance to play, he still would have gotten the Senior Bowl invite, but it would have come with a little more fanfare, in terms of the ability to have watched him. He was a turnover machine last year, had 3 picks against Morgan State, had 5 on the season, I think 15 total pass breakups. But he's another one of these kids that smaller school, 6'2"-ish, 185, runs well, is able to play man coverage. And now we'll get to see when you're at the Senior Bowl, what does he look like against the SEC, ACC receivers? What does he look like in the drills? And we've seen it every year. There's always a guy, at a couple of positions. DB normally is one of them that goes to one of these all-star games and all of a sudden starts making their move, and we've given a lot of love to Central Arkansas's, Robert Rochelle, but this is a kid I think who could give him a run for his money in terms of who's that small school guy. We saw last year Lenore Ryan, getting a guy drafted. I think, North Carolina Central going to get to hit the bell. You're going to have a guy drafted this year. You're going to get to ring the bell there for at some point in the draft. I could definitely see somebody seeing him as a worthy draft pick. Like I said, nice sized kid, but really it's the production on film on a weekly basis. And when there's turnovers to be made, he's able to grab them and turn them into plays on the other side. I'm anxious to see him however we're going to see these guys at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
But he would be a guy that if they have found a way to do at least the practices, this is somebody who will really benefit from that.
I like that mention a lot, John, because I actually just did my final eval on Brian Mills since he's not going to be playing this year, and he is long, athletic, he's springy. There's a lot to like with that, and I hope I don't know what capacity we're going to see him at the Senior Bowl, but I am certainly excited to see whatever he's able to show us leading up to draft process, because there is a lot of developmental potential with a guy like that.
I know a lot of those D coordinators always looking for those cornerbacks with that Larry Home jab. Want to knock them off and reroute their asses, right? Swear jar. But I'm just saying, that's what we want as far as those cornerbacks, to be able to get that jab out there, get that stab, and reroute them. But yes, so in parting shots here, I'm going to come to you, David. Anything you want to say in closing for the show today?
I want to say congratulations to the Raging Cajuns last night for actually beating App State for the first time in program history. I mean, that was a big, huge win, even though their long snapper kid, I'm not bagging on you. I know you had a long night, but you had a terrible night, and he struggled. I mean, the miscues on his long snaps almost cost him the game. But I just want to say big ups to the Raging Cajuns for winning that game. It's a program that I've always enjoyed watching. I got guys like Hiram Eugene out of there and stuff. So I love the Raging Cajun program. Congratulations on a big win for the program. And for everybody, on the panel, thank you for this morning and getting my mind off my injury and having some fun conversation with you guys here this morning.
Absolutely. What you got, Ryan? What's your parting shot for this morning?
I mean, just with how the current state of the world is, we're seeing games canceled week to week, which really stinks, because I was excited to actually see Cincinnati and Tulsa, which was scheduled for yesterday, in a really fun affair, because everybody wants to talk about Desmond Ridder and all the offensive guys over there at Cincinnati, some of the defensive players they have, James Wiggins, among them, IJ Sanders, the defensive end. There is a guy that has been just one of the breakout stars in all of college football, Tulsa linebacker Zaven Collins, who's listed at over 6'3", 256 pounds. He's kind of that big-bodied Sam that can play some on-ball, can play off-ball, great in coverage. There's a lot to like about him, and from my understanding, he's going to run in the 4.6s at 260 pounds, potentially playing off-ball linebacker. So a lot of stars that unfortunately are not going to be able to show their talents this weekend with the cancellations in a big moment, in a big game for a guy like a Zaven Collins. So just want to enjoy that the slate that we have today, And hopefully, as we continue forward, we're going to see less and less cancellations. I know it's probably not likely, but I just want to see some good football, and some of these guys who have really burst onto the scene continue to have that platform to show what type of talented players they are.
Appreciate that, Ryan. And I'm finished up with you, big guy. What you got, John Murphy, as your parting shot this weekend?
Yeah, we mentioned a lot of the big games, but there's some statement games that can be played early morning today.
That's true.
And you know, if you listened yesterday, Tulane, you got a chance to finish with a winning record. Okay, just a couple of hours away, kickoff at 11 a.m. at Ullman Field. You got Memphis last year. You were on a 4-game winning streak, and Memphis sent you crying with a whipping there in Memphis. You got a chance to finish with a winning record 2 years in a row. Get that done this afternoon. And then Ricky Boy up there, we got something for you. I know it's 1-5 Penn State against 2-4 Rutgers. You can't tell me that Schiano doesn't understand the significance of putting a win on the board this year and kind of sticking that nail in the coffin of Penn State's season when it comes to recruiting. Penn State Rutgers, it's not an upset, but it's still an upset this year when you look at what it looked like a year ago. And to think that Penn State is going to Rutgers and there's a serious chance that Rick will be out on the boardwalk. Well, he'll be out on the boardwalk anyway.
Walk the plank. Walk
He'll
the
be
plank.
further out on the boardwalk this afternoon. So early time for Rick to get the rave going. The fist pumping will be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sound that alarm, because I think we don't get just one. We get 2 W's out of that. And the people in New Orleans and the people on the boardwalk are cheering. Tulane and Rutgers both going for the early morning upset against Penn State and Memphis. I got at least 1 out of the 2, but I'm going to say that Rick's guys in jerseys come through as well as the Rutgers Schianos pull out a big victory.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Well, I can tell you this. Ryan, David, John, thank you guys for being on the panel. Thank you for having me. I got to thank Rick for giving me the opportunity. My parting shot is, hey, I'm just excited to be here. I got a game today, so I got to get ready for that. UVA against Boston College. That's a big game in the ACC. Looking forward to seeing more of the quarterback, Jerkovich, up close and personal. I don't know if you guys have evaluated him already closely, but, you know, he seems like he could be an NFL talent. But, you know, I'm interested in seeing him just with my own eyes. But like I said before, thank you guys. This is the NFL Draft Bible Tailgate Show. We got anything else, guys?
All good.
All good. Right. Appreciate you, Big Law.
All right. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me. And I'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.